Oh, Shalom, Rastafari, Taina Estelin. Greetings, brothers and sisters. This is Wyndham. This is your brother Yadin. And we're here in the early hours. Give thanks to another wonderful gathering, assembly on the air, in the Irit, the spirit of truth of the King of Kings, and the Moshiach B'Shem Yeshua for the gathering, in the upper room of Zion, for also the hosting, the blessed hosting of I Wyndham, brother Yifdeya, brother Yifty, and also the Reasonments from I brother Yasin as well. And also for those who are in the attendance, and hopefully those who will hear the broadcast from the the May 26th broadcast for the Rastafari Upper Room of Zion, and you can get a listen. You can hear on demand and also download on demand at the Discipleship Radio. That's our platform on the Blog Talk Radio. So in going forward and having a little more time to, bring this forward, because when we have that opportunity, there's so much, just to share and to say and to hear and to receive. And we have that particular amount of time. But I give thanks because it's always inspirations after the broadcast, that like right now, this is in a little bit of the earlier hours. It's about an hour after the broadcast. I was actually here still meditating on some of what had been said. Give thanks, Brother Yasin, for bringing forward the whole link about His Majesty, about John Hoy and the whole astronauts, because I was able to catch a article as I was speaking on that and seeing that this is connected with other things being revealed to us. It says in the word, it says that all things work towards the good of those who love Jah and who are called according to His purpose. So in our reading and feedings to the law, to the Torah, and to the prophets, and growing in grace, and the knowledge of the truth, let us continue right here. And it was on the moon landing. Now, like we said, there's a couple of related themes. We were speaking about the plain, the plain truth, about the earth, the plain truth or flat earth, the plain truth or flat earth. Or probably we say Jah earth, the plain truth, the plain. Is it the plain? Isn't it plain? It should be plain, the truth of the earth. But they're playing, right, with these truths of the earth. And this is about the whole globe and the globalism. All right. So this particular subject matter about the walking on the moon and visiting the moon, actually, to just recap a little bit right here. Yes, we found the speech where I think it was with President, the American President Johnson. There's a speech that I think was on the Haile Selassie, the Church of Haile Selassie. They had a series of speeches, and it was the particular speech where he mentioned the space flight. I noticed even in the translation, a certain specificity, Slika, the specificity to specify, with the word. Right now here, let's see if we can bring this up right here so that I them can check this out. Okay, here is on the speech to the astronaut. You see it right here. We are on the site that is known as the Ba Beta Christian, right? The Ba Beta Christian. Let's get a wide shot right there, as you can see that, or the Church of Haile Selassie. Right, when we was doing a little quick search right here, just so you can see the fullness of the page. There we go. So it's Him Church. So if ones want to follow up, and there's many very important speeches, and the great thing about it, you can basically copy and paste them. Unlike in the books, it's good to have the book version, but if you don't even have the book version, just get even the read, and you can kind of save this as well. So it's right here in the part 2, International and Cultural Relations. His Imperial Majesty speech, right, to the U.S. astronauts. So when we had clicked on that link, it brought us right here, right? It says, you could go to that opening part, and it was September 21st, 1965. So I read through it, and I also went over it again and scanned over it. And it's interesting because the only thing he really says concerning all of that, the whole space stuff, right, is down here where His Majesty says, boom, right here. He says, your space flight and subsequent flights that are to be undertaken by men like you give us confidence in the bright future of, they have mankind, but the Amharic of that would be like humanity, right? Your space flight, right? The space flight, notice that when they go up into so-called space, where they are going is actually into it's like a flight, actually. It's not what we have been told and taught. And see, we thought that everyone, there's the common notion to think that everyone kind of in that sense believed, that they went to the moon. So in our further going through the links, I'm going to go through a couple of quick pages right here, my brothers and sisters, seeking to find some particular information. That was a link. So this is some of the recent pages that we had put up there, some of the recent searches. So just going over some of these right here. And some of the content is, okay, these are our recent pages. Okay, it was about, we might have to open a new window. And I think we have it under Haile Selassie. We was researching Haile Selassie and moon landing. Okay, here we go right here, and moon landing. So we'll click on that. And there is, okay, this right here. Let's see if we can find the page, because we want to see whether His Majesty had stated, or what did he state, concerning, did he make any statements on the moon landing? Right? Because, now that we become persuaded that it was fake, at least much of it, it was something went on. They had a space flight, but it wasn't all that they had, talked about. It was just they just flew up into the upper atmosphere, right? Right here, what's it says right here? Okay, landing a man on the moon. Then it has Haile Selassie right here in this particular document. So if you will walk with me, there was a particular page that we had found a little bit earlier. Don't know why we're not able to find it again right now, but let us just see what this says. If this has anything concerning, okay, His Majesty here. Let's look up Haile and see if there's anything right here, Haile. Okay, we have this speech right here, right? This is a part of an official document, right, with a PDF of it. Okay. Now, this says right here, now, from when is this particular Apollo 11? It says, today's successful lunar landing is a momentous occasion for all mankind. This marvelous feat is proof of the gigantic strides man has made in the field of science and technology. We are fully confident that this great milestone in man's search for the unknown will give the American genius and the valiant American astronauts greater encouragement in their future probe of the solar system. We are hopeful that the results achieved in this regard will only be used for the welfare and well-being of mankind and the great cause of the world peace, right? These are a couple of the official statements here. All right. Now, some would say, well, it sounds like, these are all official statements based on the news report, as you can see right here. Different countries throughout the world are basically responding, oh, you landed on the moon? Very good. Very well. Oh, okay, that's good. So forth and so on. But here's what's interesting, right? This is let's see, this is 65, right? This document right here is, okay, this is attached, this 69. So both the 1969 and the 19th. We're going to save this document. Let us save this document as well. So we have an official statement right here from Ethiopia. You know, like I said, like how the White House would give an official response based on some, some statement, some statement. So here he's saying, well, very good. Use this for, they reported internationally, they reported a moon landing, right? And the whole world, right, at that time believed it, but not everyone actually believed it. It's interesting that that's the official statement that was put out, we can say, to the world, right? As we saw just briefly, other nations also, right? Other nations also were giving their particular, statements, they're, saying, oh, a very good, thank you, or so forth and so on. But there's one on the ground, right? There's what happened on the ground in Ethiopia that we came across. And just by, what's this right here? This is a sculpture. Interesting. All right here. Let us just save this, as we go through it. We're looking for a particular picture, right? A particular picture. You see right here, busted, So in country at that very time, when they had announced the moon landing, when they announced the moon landing within the country, it seemed as though many Ethiopians did not believe it, or if they even thought that it was even possible or even had truly happened, they kind of mocked it. Here's what we mean. We're looking for there's a particular where he's meeting in 65. We had that page open, but haven't been able to retrieve that particular page, So you see on the stamp in Liberia, which is like American colony. This is interesting, but this is some art that we had did from before, right? This is some art that we had did from before. So let's just save that right there as well. Looking for that pic. See if we can find that pic as well, right? That pic as well. Okay, this is a good one here. Okay, you see a lot of the Liberian, like stamps seems to be commemorating that event. Now, in principle, if such a thing, you have to remember from them times. You really have to think about how it was in those times, in those days and times. But the landing on the moon by we could say the common Ethiopian people of that day, the average people of that day, did not, in country, had mocked it. Okay. Excuse me, my brothers and sisters. We're just looking for this still. We'll find it and bring it forward to the eye, right? Because we're just here in the early hours, and you'll probably be watching this in the day, and maybe only have a few minutes, and we're already into 13 minutes in this particular vid. I know that some don't mind when we go in it a little bit more, but just to connect this point, then we can follow up. We can follow up on it a little bit later on, and looking through, some of the visual images concerning, and also on the globe. We like to address, the globe situation as well, because some believe that because His Majesty is looking at this globe, that means that, he believes that, on that particular level. When you really study that and examine that with what has been said, and also, let's get this one right here, because even these events, all of this is around the same time. And we see Ethiopia, we see His Majesty, we cite biblical prophecy within the mix. Remember, it was what about 50 or so, a period of 50 days after His Majesty had visited Kennedy, and Kennedy gave that speech about, I think, maybe a week or so, a couple of days, 5 to 7 or so days before he was assassinated. You recall this right here is also a very important, it's kind of a small shot right here, but he's riding in what it seems to be that same limousine, right? That later on, Kennedy would be, assassinated in. And when he came to visit his people, the Judah, and Judah would include Benjamin. So when we speak about the Yankee and the Yardie, we need to get out of that foreign, that Gentile mind, that seeks to play and divide and conquer us. Depends on what part or what branch of white supremacy we were under. Oh, you under the queen, so you're under a kingdom. You better than us who are under this so-called republic. No, my brothers and sisters. They're trying to play us. They're trying to divide and conquer us. Let's go to the law, to the Torah, right? To Jah law and to the prophets, right? Because there's nothing new in that sense under, the sun. So in speaking about the moon landing, right? And Ethiopia's, we can say, perspective, right, of the moon landing, let us, as we scroll up this page, and let's review some of the imagery and some of the images here, see if we come across that footage. I think it was in 1965. His Majesty is, I think, at NASA, and they're giving him, they're briefing him. Now, Ethiopia's relationship with the heavens is what is the next subject matter that will come into view as we continue to, unpack and lay some of the basics of this, and also to receive, the items, questions on this as well, because it's only through the questions, the reasonings that we have received that we're more able to, direct, our attention in the Holy Spirit to really, bring out what thus saith the King of Kings in Christ. Okay, this is from Tadius magazine. Tadius. All right. So I think it was NASA. Let's see right here. Haile Selassie. Right. Let's go Haile Selassie. Moon landing, NASA. What was it? It was NASA. Let's see if we can go NASA, where he was at NASA, and he's sitting down and they are discussing, they're discussing some things with him in 1965. And it is interesting. I think a couple of statements are there as well. We're looking through here. We just have this document that we've just looked at. It's like, I don't know what happened to the page. We had the page while we was on the air, but let's go right here. Let's go to in the land of Sheba. That's what we're going to bring forward, the evidence right there that we like to share with the eye, right? In the land of Sheba. So here it is stating in this particular document, in the land of Sheba, to get a better look at the cover, we can look at this right. Here we go. We can look at this right here to get a better view of the cover. This is the cover right here, in the land of Sheba, right? In the land of Sheba, and we got one of those very good old maps. You can see it in the background that has both the mainland Africa and also the Burbs or Arabia, right? This particular book is by Mimi La Follette, Summer Skill. I don't know how she pronounces her name, but this particular document right here, in the land of Solomon and Sheba, published by the Red Sea Press. We're going to look for a date. See, it's 2002. All right. This is a 2002 copyright. So it seems and appears that it's fairly recent. But in this particular document, right, in the land of Solomon and Sheba, we have come across this particular article right here, right? Or this part of it, when we was looking under, you can see at the top, Selassie moon landing. And we found that it said right here in this section, right? It said, okay, speaking of, okay, let's go to where it says John and I, right? Down here, John and I were in the ancient city of Okay, ancient city of Gondar. Let's zoom in. Now this is on page Mindanao, page 93. All right, 93. What we're gonna do is we're gonna move this over. We have that already copied, right, and paste on the side. Let us bring this right here. All right. Now, how did the Ethiopians know? All right, the Ethiopians knew, right, and it was like many people, like I said, many ones knew that something wasn't right. It was very, but not having the proof, right? Not having that proof. See, we have that proof now, right? Many ones even back then were very suspicious about this whole moon landing thing. So we have a newspaper article over here, Los Angeles Times, speaking about the walk on the moon. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. I don't know if one's peeped that right there. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad, he taught us about, I say us, speaking about the lost black and brown sheep in the house of Israel here in the wilderness of North America. He taught us about the difference between man and mankind, right? Man and mankind. You have man, it's like Jah made man, and then man makes mankind. So we have different kinds of man. In other words, Jah made man in his image and after his likeness, right? But man, right, in kind of breaking away and kind of falling from that makes mankind. And with all these kind of men, man becomes very unkind. So man to man is so unjust. But you notice that they say one small step for man. Even we look at that in the sense of man, the original, say, the black man. One giant leap for mankind. In other words, one giant leap, when we look at it in the big picture, for the times of the Gentiles, for we can say the Anglo-American enterprise, we can say, by extension, racism, white supremacy. And this is not directly against individuals, but it is looking at scripture and prophecy. Right. And then looking at history and even current events, and with the spirit of truth, seeing the true picture. So over here, we have that section from the page 93, where it says, John and I, this is from the book In the Land of Solomon and Sheba. Right. John and I were in the ancient city of Gondar when Neil Armstrong spoke to the world from the moon. Now we see this connection over here. We're looking at the book In the Land of Solomon and Sheba. It appears to have a 2002 copyright. So it seems like a fairly recent book. And it's this particular book right here. Right. It's this particular book right here concerning the moon landing. So we call this and we refer to this as Haile Selassie Ethiopians. In other words, the Ethiopians of the time and the visitation of His Majesty, of that generation, right? Based on this evidence and other evidence, knew that things were not the way they were being newsed in the media. And so let's go on right here. So Neil Armstrong spoke to the world from the moon, as you can see in the quote on the right hand side. It was 3 a.m, but we had brought our portable radio with us so we could share that historic drama. Now, these are some of the, Gentiles, I would dare say the righteous Gentiles who came to visit, Ethiopia, and came to tour that African Zion, right? And to see that, that sign in the sea. She says it all in her title, In the Land, right? What is the title of the book? In the Land of Solomon and Sheba. So she's saying that she's bearing witness to being in Ethiopia, right, during the time of the so-called moon landing, when one of the astronauts, Neil Armstrong, spoke to the world, right, allegedly, from the moon. It was 3 a.m, but we had brought our portable radio with us so we can share that historic drama. Now, they're in Ethiopia, mind you. They were in the ancient city of Gondar, right, or Gondar. Right? Now, the next morning, the streets of Gondar were jammed, but It had nothing to do with the moon landing. Now, I was just looking at this after the broadcast, brothers and sisters, after the Upper Room of Zion broadcast where, we were briefly touching on that, and mainly because I Wyndham, Brother Yasun brought that up, just about the moon landing and the speech that you had saw, and also that connection with the Tower of Babel and all of that is, and statements of His Majesty. So then, so quick research. As we showed you, we put Haile Selassie moon landing. We looked at the different links, a little bit of the excerpt parts, like you see, okay, this is the title. This is a little bit that's in there, and click on it and read a little bit more. So we went to the Google Books and we found this book, In the Land of Solomon and Sheba by Mimi Lafayette, Summer Skill. I'll say that Summer Skill. Maybe it's Summer Skill. Either way, right? Her testimony is what's really important to us, right? Because I think her and her husband, if I'm correct, John, haven't read the book, but from what I've gleaned, right? Now, it's so interesting. This book seemed really, really good. Honestly, I'm going to seek to see if we can find maybe a new or used one, pretty affordable. That's a little secret for you all out there. You hear about books. Sometimes if you go search, you can find a new or used book. And sometimes the most you will pay sometimes is for shipping and handling. Just a little word to the brothers and sisters. Yes, books have those sale prices and, or those cover prices. But, let's use this technology, this means opportunity we have wisely, right? So she says that this is at the time, she was in Ethiopia at the time that Neil Armstrong allegedly, spoke to the world from the moon. It was 3 a.m. So it was like 3 a.m., right? And so they brought their radio because to them, these Gentiles that came from the West to Ethiopia, it was historic for everybody. Wow, they went to the moon. They on the moon, man, on the moon, right? The next morning, the streets of Gondar were jammed. The city, that particular ancient Ethiopian Hebrew, there's a lot of roots there, but it had nothing to do with the moon landing. So they were like, wait, hold on for a moment. They might have thought at first, when they saw the crowd, they're like, oh man, what's going on? I guess the Ethiopians are celebrating the moon landing. Not. Right? They were not celebrating the moon landing. But let me read on. Let me read what Mimi Lafayette, like what she said. She said, tens of thousands of Ethiopian peasants of all generations had flocked to Gondar by foot, mule, and bus from many, many miles around. They had come to welcome the visiting emperor, Negusa Negest. Right? They shrieked with joy when they saw him. John Hoy, Haile Selassie's popular name, John Hoy, Your Majesty, right? Eventually, the moon landing made news in rural Ethiopia. You gotta love, I country folk. You gotta love them from the get-go. The simple, the plain people, the people of the land. These are the people that Yeshua HaMashiach ministered, the people of the land, right? When the news of the moon landing, right? When it made news, in other words, that man had landed on the moon. That man had landed on the moon. It says, eventually, the moon landing made news in rural Ethiopia. So, when Neil Armstrong spoke to the world, allegedly from the moon, right? It was roughly about 3 a.m. in the morning, right, in Ethiopia. Haile Selassie was coming through to visit this ancient black Hebrew, Ethiopian Hebrew province, Gondar, right? Known as Gondar, right? Ancient capital, royal, you could say a royal city, right? A city that's very important for us, as the once lost, now found, children of the Ethiopians, likened, as we the children of Israel likened to the children of Ethiopians. When the news, right? Finally, it made news in rural Ethiopia. And NASA sent out a man, right, in spacesuit to lecture. I was like, what? You see, this is why sometimes gleaning some of this information that's out there, like in the harvest time, gleaning this information out there. We just went and searched. We showed you how we did it, right? And we went to the Google books, right? To see what some of the writers, they say, if you want to hide something, what you do, you put it in a book. Well, give thanks that we've taken a look, because we find out now that the moon landing was making news in rural Ethiopia. NASA, they sent out a man in a spacesuit to lecture. So I'm thinking, a spacesuit to lecture where? In Ethiopia? During the time of John Hoy. And the goose and the gas. Abatachin. Unatinde. Okay. Right. What happened next? In the Ethiopian countryside, students at one secondary school found the idea of landing on the moon ludicrous. They found this completely ludicrous. So the students, notice that the students in the Ethiopian countryside at one secondary school, we know that these schools founded by the will of our Father, by the will of His Majesty Kedamawi Haile Selassie, right? That they found this whole idea of landing on the moon ludicrous. Now we're talking about back in the 60s, mind you. And what did they do next? They ran the NASA man out of town. What? Right? The Ethiopians, right? The careful, the covenant, the careful, not the careless, not the betrayers, but the careful ones, the blameless ones, right? The ones that really we get to see that fruit of the teaching of His Majesty, that first of all, when they heard the idea of landing on the moon and one small step for man and one giant leap for mankind, they understood the con game that was going on, right? And they ran the NASA man who came to lecture. They ran him out of town. They sent a man to lecture in a spacesuit. You know what I mean? A spacesuit. So these students, you could tell that they were growing in the knowledge of the truth. His Majesty had taught them well, right? There was no need to be so-called overly, to be, humble, but in the spirit and the truth. They ran the NASA man in the spacesuit out of town, bouncing stones off his helmet. What? This is a very important testimony that when the moon landing, right, had made news in rural Ethiopia. And when we say rural Ethiopia, we're saying the Ethiopia of the King of Kings, right? Of the time and the visitation of His Majesty. We are not counting this modern Ethiopia as being part of that. We have to look at the time and the dispensation. So this is in the time and the visitation of the King of Kings, right? They had ran the NASA man out of town and they threw stones, right? They threw stones at him. Symbolically, what throwing stones are. To throw stones, regular, like it's like to curse. Right? They, in that sense, stoning him. So they stoned the NASA man. So the Ethiopians during the time of John Hoy, of the King of Kings, of the line of the tribe of Judah, was not falling for that. So the statement that we see in Haile Selassie's name, where it's a basic formal statement, it's a response, a formal, like governmental response to the news, as we see all the other heads of state saying, oh, okay, the news that we heard. But at the very same time as we can say those statements no doubt were given, right? Or shortly after that, the word on the ground, what we're looking at is the word on the ground. The word on the ground was that NASA, the NASA was not believed by the people, that this moon landing being a hoax was known to the Ethiopians, right? The blameless Ethiopians of that generation of His Majesty, of that generation of the King of Kings, before the degeneration, before we get to the careless, the creeping coup and all of that, which brought us into another dispensation of that 40 or so years, the half an hour space, and that 40 or so years. Will it be a jubilee is the question that we have. But we already know that we are in that 40 year, the Shemitah, the Shemitah, the jubilee year. So the connection of these things, the moon landing, how is that significant? Well, it's significant as we continue with the plain truth, right? Continue with the plain truth about the earth, right? About the earth. Now, the earth, is the earth a planet? I would caution us on plane and planet. They sound similar, but similar is not the same, right? So the plain truth about the earth, that is it's a very key connection, because Jah reveals to us his creation, right? We say we love the Almighty. People say they love God, right? What we have to I can say, do you worship this pseudoscience that tells us we live in a heliocentric universe that based on, who was that guy? Copernicus, his philosophies, the philosophies of Copernicus. You see what I'm saying? Because see, that is the matrix right there. That is also part of the matrix. My brothers and sisters, just to share a little word right here. Yes, the moon landing was a hoax. And from the available evidence, right, the Ethiopians of the generation, okay, we get into that as well. The Ethiopians of the generation of His Majesty, as we have cited from this particular document. So you talk about the walk on the moon, that the Ethiopians recognize, right, that this moon landing, this moon landing was a hoax. And while, Neil Armstrong was allegedly speaking from the moon, speaking to the world from the moon, His Majesty was visiting Gondar, an ancient Black Hebrew, Black Jewish, Judaic province, very, very important in our story as children of Israel and children of the Ethiopians, that he was visiting there, right? And the people were, gathering, to their Father, our Father, their King, and I, King of Kings. But this whole thing about the moon landing is quite obvious, and we give thanks once again, to this writer right here for this particular document, this particular labor of love, right, known as In the Land of Solomon and Sheba, because we get this particular write-up right here concerning when Neil Armstrong was speaking those words that he spoke allegedly from the moon. This gives us now eyewitness from Ethiopia in that time, and it gives us two important facts of while he was speaking to the world allegedly from the moon, right, and in Ethiopia, there was a celebration, but it had nothing to do with the moon landing, right? So they didn't get caught up in that. And we know this even further because the further witness is that when the moon landing had made the news, right, in rural Ethiopia, right, when it had made the news, we're going to bring that in as well. When it had made the news in rural Ethiopia, that Ethiopian students or students from the countryside, right? Students from the countryside, a man from NASA was sent out to lecture the Ethiopians in a spaceman suit. And the students basically ran the NASA man out of town. And they thought the whole idea of landing on the moon as ludicrous. You know what I mean? And they basically stoned him, or they say bouncing stones off of his space helmet, right? There's a little bit more to this, but it's this right here. We have to just kind of take a little Selah moment right here on this as well. So who knew? Well, my brothers and sisters, it's very clear that the remnant of that fateful generation, right, of the children of the Ethiopians, they knew, right? And even if they so-called allegedly did and were able truly to land on the moon, what does it matter? Because the earth is the Lord's, right? The earth is Jah's and the fullness thereof, the world and they that dwell therein. give thanks, brothers and sisters, for the listening. I know it's been a little bit long right here, but I hope you're able to follow up on some of these right here and also share, with I any news or views on our Grace book on the internet. That's RastafariGroundation.com, and can also make links with our brothers and sisters elsewhere in social media. And be sure to share this, with the brothers and sisters, and also share other information. Let's keep in the communication. Yes, Rastafari. Shalom.